If you think money can buy respect, this case will convince you otherwise. It's an ordinary morning in a Providence courtroom. Fluorescent lights hum. The flag hangs still. Wooden benches hold people who took time off work just to wait. They grip folded tickets and envelopes, paper soft at the edges. Judge Caprio moves through the docket with a steady rhythm. A nurse who parked by a hydrant during a night shift. A retired mailman who misread a sign. Their voices are quiet, respectful. He listens, asks a question or two, offers a small smile. The room feels almost gentle. Then the side door opens. She walks in as if the place is a minor stop on her schedule. Tailored jacket, spotless sneakers, a bag that could buy an old sedan. Phone in her hand, screen bright. She doesn't look at the judge or the clerk, scans the room like it's a lobby. She doesn't sit. She leans on the rail, thumb flicking across the glass. "Yeah, I'm here now," she says into the phone, not bothering to lower her voice. "It'll take 5 minutes. Dad will handle it." The clerk stops mid-sentence. Heads turn. The murmur in the room drains away. On the bench, Judge Caprio raises his eyes over the file. "Miss," he says, calm but firm. "In this courtroom, we speak to the court, not over it." Most people would apologize and hide the phone. She doesn't. She ends the call with a tap, keeps it in her hand, and finally looks at him. No fear. Only impatience, the kind that comes from a life where doors open on cue. The clerk reads her name and the charge into the microphone. Speeding in a school zone, 27 miles per hour over the posted limit. The numbers land with a dull thud. Someone in the second row mutters, "That's kids' time." A woman with silver hair presses her lips together. The young woman tilts her head. "So?" she says. "It was empty. I was in a hurry. I'm not paying those fines." The silence that follows is heavy. Men and women who once walked children to buses shift in their seats. A grandfather's fingers tighten around his cap. Judge Caprio laces his hands on the bench. "In a school zone," he says slowly, "children can appear without warning. You understand that, don't you?" She gives a small shrug. "With respect, Your Honor," she replies. And respect arrives hollow. "My father's company pays for half these roads. Safety is your job. I just drive on what we fund." The line cuts through the room. Wood creaks as someone leans forward. Even the officer by the wall looks up. On the bench, the judge's face stays composed, but something in his eyes settles, as if the real case has stepped into view. Not a ticket, but an attitude. He taps the file once. "All right," he says. "Let's see whether the law agrees with your father's balance sheet." Judge Caprio doesn't raise his voice. He simply leans forward, folds his hands, and asks her the kind of questions that never sound threatening, only clarifying. "How long have you been driving, miss?" She shifts her weight, eyes flicking toward the door, as if gauging how fast she could leave. "Since I was 16, she says. "I've never had an accident." "And the speed that morning? What was the reason?" Her jaw tightens. The courtroom senses the change. She's not offended. She's annoyed that someone is entitled to probe. "I had somewhere to be," she says. "Important business." He nods, waiting. He's patient in a way that forces people to fill the silence. She exhales sharply. "Look, I wasn't out joyriding. I had obligations." "Obligations in Providence?" the judge asks. "You're not from here." A faint hesitation crosses her face, the first break in her smooth confidence. "I'm from Houston," she answers. "My father runs." "Well, you've probably heard the name." She doesn't say the company. She doesn't need to. People in the room exchange looks. The oil firm has funded roads, bridges, and lawsuits in equal measure. It's a name that buys things most families can't imagine buying. "So, this trip," the judge continues. "Work?" "Personal," she says quickly. Too quickly. The word lands strangely. Not wrong, just guarded. Behind her, a middle-aged man leans toward his neighbor. "Funny," he whispers, loud enough for the front rows. "Didn't that oil outfit have that fight with the university here?" His neighbor nods, lips pressed thin. Judge Caprio hears the murmur, but doesn't react. He studies her instead, as if turning over a puzzle piece. "You mentioned important business," he says. "Does it involve the university?" Her fingers tighten around her phone. It's almost imperceptible. A small clench, then stillness. "I don't see how that matters," she says. "It may," he replies gently. "Your behavior today, it tells me there's something behind this ticket." Her posture changes, not defensive, but brittle, as if a weight she carries isn't entirely hers. The courtroom, full of older faces lined by decades of work and loss, senses the tension. It's not the swagger of a spoiled heiress. It's the practiced calm of someone who grew up knowing mistakes don't land on her. Consequences land on others. She finally answers, voice low. "I came because the university asked for a meeting. Something about a paper trail." She pauses, then adds, "People here think tickets matter. Where I'm from, they're paperwork. Routine. Not something anyone should stress over." She isn't bragging. She's stating a fact of her upbringing. A world where laws are mild inconveniences and signatures erase them. Judge Caprio doesn't challenge her. Instead, he asks, "Do you believe the law applies differently to people depending on their income?" There is a flicker in her expression, almost confusion, as if he asked why water is wet. "I believe," she says carefully, "that some people have more options. That's all." "And you rely on those options," he says. A long silence follows. She doesn't nod. She doesn't deny it. She just breathes out. A slow, shaky sound she tries to cover. "I'm not used to being questioned like this," she says softly, eyes drifting downward. "People usually accommodate." This time, the murmur in the room is softer, not judgmental, not mocking. It's recognition. Older men and women who've lived long enough to see what privilege does, how it bends a young person long before they realize they've been bent at all. Judge Caprio's tone remains steady. "Here, miss," he says, "we ask because we want to understand. The truth doesn't need to embarrass you, but you must be willing to speak it." Her grip on the phone loosens. Her voice, for the first time, loses its practiced polish. "I'm just not sure how to do that." Judge Caprio turns a page in the file, and the quiet rasp of paper echoes louder than it should. He studies the report again, this time more slowly. Something doesn't add up. The faint tightening around his eyes gives it away. "Miss," he says, "you stated you were alone that morning." She lifts her chin. "I was." He rotates the monitor toward himself. The traffic camera shows a second shape in the passenger seat, a person leaning forward. The words drop like a stone into a still pond. Someone in the back inhales sharply. Her eyelids flutter, just once, before she firms her face. "It's a shadow," she says. "A reflection. Whatever. It's irrelevant." But it isn't. Everyone in the room senses it. The judge's voice softens. "Who are you trying to protect?" "I told you," she snaps. "No one. This doesn't matter." A chair creaks. A woman in the last row wipes her eyes with a tissue she's been holding since the docket began. Her shoulders tremble. She tries to stifle it, but the sound slips out. A quiet, aching sob. Her daughter leans over to steady her. Judge Caprio glances toward them, not to scold, to acknowledge. The woman lost her teenage girl years ago, struck by a speeding driver outside a middle school. Some people in the room know the story, others don't, but grief has a way of filling space without explanation. The young woman at the rail follows their gaze, but her expression doesn't harden. It falters, a hairline fracture, visible only for a breath. Caprio returns to her. Miss, misleading the court is serious, but hiding the identity of a passenger during an incident in a school zone, that crosses into a different category. The temperature in the courtroom shifts. Shoes shuffle. A man clears his throat. She finally breaks the silence. Fine. You want it? Yes. Someone was with me. She swallows. A guy. It was personal. The room stills again. Not angry now, just waiting. The judge's voice remains even. Who was he? Her answer arrives slowly, as if dragged out from under a weight. A student, she says, from the university. A beat. The same university in conflict with your father's company? The judge asks. Her throat tightens before she answers. Yes. A small storm of whispers ripples through the benches. Older men exchange looks. Women murmur to each other. Not condemnation. Recognition. They've seen this pattern before. Young people pulled between power and truth, between loyalty and survival. Judge Caprio leans back slightly. Why was he in your car? She hesitates, then exhales in defeat. He needed a ride. He said someone was about to expose him for knowing too much about the lawsuit. He wanted to talk to a reporter before they shut him up. A slow, heavy hush takes over the room. Even the air seems to suspend itself. So you were driving fast, the judge says quietly, because you were afraid. She doesn't answer. You weren't running from the police, he continues. You were running from the situation. A trembling breath escapes her. Not loud, just enough for the people closest to hear. And you were afraid, he adds, of what your father would do if he knew you helped that student. This time she nods. Just once. Caprio closes the file. His tone shifts. Firmer, but without cruelty. Understand something clearly. If you conceal a passenger involved in a speeding incident in a protected zone, you're not dealing with a fine anymore. You're stepping into criminal territory. A ripple spreads through the courtroom. A soft gasp, a rustle of jackets, a subtle lean forward. Her fingers, resting on the phone, curl inward. So, the judge says, are you prepared to continue hiding him? Her answer is barely audible. If I tell you everything, she whispers, then I'm in real trouble. The judge doesn't reply immediately. He lets the truth settle exactly where it belongs, in the center of the room, where everyone can feel the weight she's been carrying and the cliff edge she now stands on. The judge nods to the officer beside him. Let's review the body cam footage, he says, as if he already suspects what it will reveal. The courtroom falls into a hush. The small speaker crackles, and the video begins. Headlights, gravel, the faint rustle of early morning wind. Then her voice, not sharp, not arrogant, but trembling. Please, she tells the officer on the recording. He said he'd call my father. Just let me go. A few people lean forward, startled. On the footage, she isn't posturing or smirking. Her hands shake around her phone. Her expression is fear. Real, unpolished, unhidden. The video ends. The silence afterward isn't hostile. It's heavier than that. Judge Caprio folds his glasses, lays them gently on the bench. Miss, he says, you weren't frightened of the officer. You were frightened of the man sitting beside you. Her eyes shudder, as though a door behind them has been pulled closed. Who was he? She presses her lips together, holding the words too long. Then something gives way. Aaron, she says. He's a student employee at the university's research office. He handles grant data, the kind of numbers that can ruin people if they reach the wrong hands. And he reached yours, the judge says quietly. A few older men in the gallery exchange a knowing look. They've lived long enough to understand how quickly powerful institutions close ranks. She continues, voice thin but steady. He told me he discovered irregularities. Money routed where it shouldn't be. He was terrified they'd fire him or destroy him professionally. He asked me to drive him to a reporter before anyone found out. So you believed him? She hesitates. I believed he was scared, and I knew if he was right, the fallout would land on my father's desk. This sparks a low stir in the room. Not outrage, but comprehension. It's the kind of tangled situation ordinary people recognize, but rarely witness from the inside. The judge's tone softens, but his questions sharpen. Were you trying to protect your father? Or protect that young man? She looks down at her hands. Both. Neither. I don't know. Her breath shudders. I grew up being told loyalty matters more than explanations. But that night, everything felt wrong. A woman in the second row shakes her head, but not at the girl, at the pressure she recognizes in her voice, the burden of family legacy, the expectation to be an extension of someone else's reputation. Judge Caprio speaks again, but now the courtroom feels smaller, more intimate. Miss, you sit between two institutions larger than yourself. One is your father's company. The other is a university defending its name. Both have lawyers. Neither cares about your peace of mind. Her throat works before she whispers. I know. You're not on trial for their actions, he says. You're here because of yours. And right now, your choices point in two different directions. For the first time, her voice cracks. I wasn't trying to break the law. I was trying not to be crushed. The room absorbs that sentence. Elderly faces, weathered with their own histories of compromise and survival, soften. The judge doesn't look triumphant. He looks deeply, almost painfully, human. You've been taught, he says, that consequences are things your father's office resolves. But fear is something you've had to manage alone. She closes her eyes. Yes. Tell me one thing honestly, he says. If you weren't your father's daughter, would you have driven that fast for this young man? Her eyes open again, unguarded, vulnerable. I would have driven slower, she admits, but I still would have helped him. It's not an excuse. It's not an alibi. It's the first clean truth she's spoken all morning. The judge sits back, absorbing it, while the courtroom holds its breath, sensing that the story has just shifted, not with drama, but with clarity. Judge Caprio lets a long breath settle over the room before speaking. It isn't frustration, it's consideration, the kind of pause that comes from weighing a young life against the machinery pressing on it. When he finally addresses the courtroom, it isn't to her. We forget something, he says, voice carrying without force. The law isn't meant to intimidate. It isn't meant to shield. It's meant to reflect who we are, and who we choose to be when no one else can decide for us. The murmurs die instantly. Even the woman with the tissue stills her hands. Then he turns back to the young woman at the rail. You came in here expecting this process to be a formality, he says. A signature, a number, something handled by a phone call. But now that the truth is emerging, I need to know something very simple. Her shoulders rise and fall, a quiet, involuntary brace. Do you want this court to protect you, he asks, or to hide what you've done? Her eyes widen, not in indignation, but confusion. It's the first question she cannot meet with a shrug or a polished answer. She looks around the room, at faces older than her entire worldview, and something raw flickers across her expression. I want. She swallows. I want someone to tell me what's right. Not what's useful. Not what keeps people happy. Just the truth. That confession lands heavily, the kind of admission the elderly audience recognizes as a turning point, not a tactic. Then tell us yours, the judge says. Her fingers tremble around the railing. She speaks slowly, each sentence sounding like it costs her something. Yes, I was driving too fast. I panicked. Aaron told me he uncovered financial manipulation at the university involving my father's company. I didn't know what to believe, but he said they were going to fire him and bury whatever he found. He begged me to take him to someone who could protect him. She inhales sharply, then continues. I was terrified. Not of the police. Not of the fine. I was terrified of my father finding out I helped someone he might consider a threat. The gallery stays utterly silent. No judgment, no sighs. Just the quiet empathy of people who've spent decades living through consequences she's never tasted. The judge's voice is steady, almost tender. Why hide all of this until now? Because in my world, she says, telling the truth is the fastest way to lose everything. And in this room, he replies, it's the fastest way to find yourself. She blinks, fighting not tears, but a kind of unfamiliar clarity. Judge Caprio straightens the papers before him. For the speeding violation, I will reduce the fine, not dismiss it, reduce it. You endangered people, even unintentionally, and accountability matters. She nods, accepting it without flinching. But, he continues, your bigger mistake wasn't on the road. It was here. Her breath catches. You were ready to lie about someone who trusted you. You were ready to hide behind comfort instead of character. He pauses, not to scold, to let the point land softly but firmly. I'm not penalizing you for helping someone in fear. I'm penalizing you for being afraid of your own honesty. A quiet rustle moves through the room, a sound of deep, collective agreement. Her chin lowers in something very close to humility. She isn't crumbling. She's steadying. The judge adds one final note, his tone almost fatherly. You can't choose where you come from, but you can choose who you are when it matters. Her voice comes out as a whisper, almost reverent. I understand. And for the first time since she entered, the courtroom believes she does. Judge Caprio gathers the file as if preparing to close the chapter. The tension in the room loosens, not fully, but enough for people to breathe again. He's moments from delivering the final procedural words when her voice breaks through the quiet. Your Honor. Wait. He looks up. The firmness in her tone isn't defiance, it's resolve, new and uncertain, but real. If I decide to tell the truth about everything I know, she says, does it change anything? The question hangs heavy, suspended over the courtroom like a fragile thread. Not a plea, not a strategy. A young woman asking what grown-ups rarely dare to ask. Will honesty actually matter? Judge Caprio doesn't answer immediately. He leans back, hands folded, studying her, not as the daughter of a magnate, not as a violator of a school zone statute, but as someone standing at the threshold of adulthood for the first time. Truth always changes something, he says, voice low but resonant. But sometimes, the only thing it changes is you. A long, reverent silence follows. Those words land with an almost physical weight, especially on the older listeners, who have lived through decades of choices that changed only them. She nods slowly, as if absorbing a verdict deeper than any fine. The judge offers no instruction, no roadmap. He simply closes the file. Your case is resolved, he says. What comes next is your decision. The gavel never falls. It isn't needed. She steps back from the rail, movements cautious, as though her body hasn't quite caught up with the new shape her thoughts are taking. She walks toward the exit. Most defendants slip out quickly, eager to escape the room where their mistakes were named. She doesn't. As she passes the last row, the older woman, the one who cried earlier, reaches out and gently touches her wrist. The young woman stops. The older woman's voice is soft, weathered by years of loss. "My daughter was afraid to speak up too," she murmurs. "Fear doesn't vanish. You just learn to walk through it anyway." The young woman's breath shivers, though she manages a quiet, "Thank you." No dramatics, no collapse. Just two strangers sharing a truth neither intended to voice today. She steps out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hum just as they did when she arrived, but something inside her is no longer humming. It's settling. She pulls out her phone, not with the old restless tapping, but with deliberate fingers. She scrolls to a contact she's called hundreds of times, but never like this. She presses "call." When the line clicks open, she doesn't wait for his greeting. "Dad," she says, steady as a held breath. "We need to talk." There's no explanation, no confession, just the first honest foundation laid down in years. Because the battle ahead isn't in that courtroom, it's in the conversation she's finally ready to start.